things. While the script, I guess, is there for whatever you want to believe. The bottom line is that the visual look of that movie is what carried it on, not necessarily the philosophy, which the Matrix philosophy is not overly new. Tying in artificial intelligence, or I'm sure as the brothers thought, or now sisters, thought that this was, again, a metaphor for regular society that they were traumatized by now being people who were in one sex and didn't feel comfortable there, felt they should be another sex. Both brothers did this. So this was a trauma that they were basically emphasizing through their actual, this fight against the machines, which was basically a fight against the common world of sexuality. Everything there was based on Japanese anime, and everything shown there looks like something right out of a Japanese anime. And of course, I believe, if you look at everything, the coats and everything else, they're almost exact copies from Japanese anime that I've seen out there that are popular, which also tends to have a little philosophical content to it as well. Certainly, this was an interesting statement, and what they were using as the machines were really, they're saying, what society was. So when we move into that, the really only thing that ties into modern society, that shows society in a blunt and practical and honest way, is the actual films of Billy Jack, which I believe there were, now I'm trying to remember, I just saw his, I never really saw the trial of Billy Jack, and I think there were 4 of them, I'm not sure. There was the original one, Born Losers, then Billy Jack. I remember seeing Billy Jack in the drive-in with my family. It was heavily promoted on TV, and the drive-in was packed, and that's the largest independent film of all time, even to this day. So it was a smart thing. It was the first film, as so many firsts that are in Billy Jack, and Billy Jack gets no respect whatsoever. The first film or series of films that showed the horrible corruption, how bad the police were, how the military are murderers, and they showed people he went on vision trips, all the things that are very, very advanced, astral projecting, remote viewing, all of that was demonstrated in Billy Jack in a real world, showing you the kind of scum that are out there today, the kind of people that are running this world, the corruption. What corrupt? Did they show any corruption in the Matrix? I can't remember any corruption there. They showed society being against the good guys of unknown sexuality. But I didn't see any great corruption made there. Certainly, I guess you could interpret some of the things going on in the Matrix as corruption, but most people were actually controlled by the Matrix. That's not the same thing as being corrupt. Certainly, the prisoner didn't show any corruption. They at least not overly directly. You can interpret some of that, but you're not showing the corruption of a bigger self-reality there. When you show actual military and police, as they did in Billy Jack, you are getting right in everybody's face and saying what's going on, not making it some sort of fantasy. And let's get it clear. The Matrix was a science fiction fantasy film, as was The Prisoner, regardless of its appearance to be in kind of modern times, being filled in modern places. It's a fantasy, and what went on there was a fantasy reality where this guy could act like the jerk that he always did in real life, and nobody really stopped him. So I guess it was kind of autobiography there of how nasty McGoohan was, and he got away with it, and nobody stopped him. When you get into all these things, and there are a few series and a few movies that talk about this, but when you really get down to the facts of one man's fight against the system and corruption, the Billy Jack movies are the best out there, hands down. The new Billy Jack DVDs, which have old commentaries on them and new commentaries done just before McGoohan died at 80, give you some fantastic insights of the kind of harassment was going on with him and what he was doing. And he was able to fight the system in real life, not some fantasy sci-fi stuff with Warner Brothers throwing millions and tens of millions of dollars at you, as would happen in The Matrix, or the millions that were thrown at McGoohan so that he couldn't even finish his script, put out 24 episodes because that was beyond his pea brain. So the whole idea is that McGoohan was able to do this on a shoestring budget, and he brought all the very important issues of the times that are basically the issues that we even still have today, brought them into the light and did that. And he was harassed and outlawed and blacklisted in Hollywood and everything that goes with that. The crybaby liberals of Hollywood really didn't have the balls to stand up to the system, as they never have, considering how corrupt and how they buy all the cops off and everything else that Hollywood did, like they did with Errol Flynn, who was staying in a hotel with a 16-year-old girl in Hollywood and got away with it. So the whole idea is that all of this was stuff that happened, but Hollywood made sure they were very, very corrupt. So the whole idea is we have that reality that's out there. So if you want stuff to show what the real world is about, and the trial of Billy Jack and the different films that came after that are extremely profound, and the actual audio commentaries, and you have to look for those series. I don't know if they're still in print or not, but I'm sure you can find them. With those commentaries are probably the best that you ever find out there. And it's brutally honest and shows you exactly what's happening. Unlike The Matrix, which is a god-awful fantasy, and of course even The Prisoner, which tries to maintain itself as a real depiction, but is a fantasy world of the village and how he was treated and what's going on. And yet, of course, it is very profound in its own way, but it had really nothing to do with McGoohan, who had nothing to think about or saying. Now, getting back to The Prisoner here, he had years and years to make a new prisoner, and he could make further statements. And, the Warski sisters had 3 films and said an awful lot. He had this series, which I guess is 17 hours of series, not if we count the actual minutes, probably more like 15 hours, to make lots of statements. But if he wanted to make more statements and talk about things, he never was able to do it. He couldn't get anything produced. Nobody would back him. There's been talk for years and years of a Prisoner movie that he was supposed to be behind, but I'm assuming the script he wrote for that or what he wanted to put in there was pretty crap. So the whole idea, several of the things he had ideas for that are mentioned in this book were pretty kind of boring. It really had nothing to say about anything, even though the concepts are a little bit interesting. But he never could get it off the ground. Nobody wanted to work with him because he was a big, rude, obnoxious guy. So the whole idea is none of that ever happened until a really bad sequel was made of The Prisoner, which just was garbage. It's super depressing, super bad, and had none of the really good elements of the original Prisoner and had really nothing to say. So that came across without him, but he never was out in the forefront. He didn't go out and push The Prisoner until the very end, where he had nothing else. The only thing he had left. Basically he's a one-shot performer. Everything really hinged on The Prisoner, and that was it. And that's all he'll ever be known for with all of his work, which I don't know how many movies he made, but basically they're all trash. Let's get real here. So the whole idea is that he never was able to get that through. He certainly had certain connections and people, but the bottom line, he had nothing to say about it. He couldn't get that off the ground. He was a big failure. He had no further statements to make on any level whatsoever, saying that he wanted to be free to take your money and do what he wanted with it on his own egotistical ride, drunken and stinking of cigarettes. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to with this guy. He didn't have anything to say. There's no statements from him. There's no anything else. He claimed to have written other things, and that his family has. None of this has ever come out and never will. I think it's all a bunch of crap, and certainly his family apparently has enough money from his work that they're not interested in getting out. I don't think they have anything to say either. I'm sure they've been highly harassed and suppressed. Just shut your mouth and go in the corner because you don't want to confront Daddy, who may kick the hell out of you, beat you. Who knows what these people were put through with this violent, manic, depressive that this person was. Drunken, manic, depressive, chain smoker. So the whole idea is all these things that go involved with this, nothing has come out and nothing ever will. It's an empty hole and there's nothing there, and he has nothing further to say. It's just the way it is. And as I said, I've ran into this with many other people out there that play these kind of silent games and also really have nothing to do. I've talked to many authors who've written books and there's nothing else in them. I said, well, write a follow-up, do this area that's Oh, and then they do it for money, and it's the biggest crap you could possibly see. And that's exactly what happened with McGoohan here. So this is an empty hole. There's nothing there. We can take the prisoner for the magnificent series it is, but he has very little credit to be given with any of it. And basically, the prisoner happened in spite of him, not because of him. Certainly, he had some interesting aspects that he added, and some dramatic notes where he abused people and put them through tests. One actor even had a heart attack because of the callous disregard for that actor, because he wanted to get out of scene. So the whole idea, this is the kind of crap. Is that free will? No, that sounds to me like a real dominant, dictatorial, and abusive way of operating. So we all have to really understand what was going on there. So in spite of him, that came out. You want to find somebody who did everything, who took time, who wrote scripts and worked on them for years? Well, that's most good movies happen like that. Certainly Billy Jack were scripts that were carefully written out, carefully produced and put together, not while you were filming it. Oh, the trucks are here. We want to film Billy Jack 3. Okay, let's start writing. So, no, that wasn't the case. And certainly it wasn't the case with The Matrix, who had finished scripts and everything else. Now, you may want to change things as you go on, but the bottom line is that's the kind of unprepared, arrogant nonsense that Patrick McGoohan put together. And what else has he done? Nothing. Absolutely nothing but crap movies that he played very undesirable characters. So I don't want to play bad guys. That's all you did, Patrick, because you're a nasty little guy yourself. Simple as that. And almost everybody who's known McGoohan has come to the same conclusions as it goes with it. So let's look through some of these to give you a little, if you're a McGoohan whatever. I don't know if I was ever a fan of his. I was curious of him because he never really did anything of value. Here he is as a young boy. That goes with that. Let me pull some of these things out here. These are all that's in there. Here he is as a young man as well. Here he is with his wife, Joan, who he's married to most of his life. These are cuts from newspapers. Here's another picture of him as Danger Man. And he turned down a lot of good parts because of the fact he made excuses which he couldn't have pulled off. James Bond, The Saint, he could never do those. He doesn't have the acting ability to play these soft characters. He would have them screaming all over the place. Now, whether he would have got those or stayed in that part is very unlikely. Ports Muron, that's again, Danger Man was filmed there, and that's where the prisoner was filmed. He didn't discover that again. Here he is in one of the episodes and so forth. Here's Ice Station Zebra. That was the big film he did after or during The Prisoner. But basically he got that role because it was another secret agent role that he got from Danger Man. So he did a bunch of other stuff. You know, he looks like a mean, nasty guy, and that's pretty much what he was. And he's an empty guy. He had nothing to say about much of anything. There's nothing to this man. It's a really hollow person who has left nothing but a series, which he gets credit for, which basically was a bunch of people's energy that went into it. And certainly he did not write the scripts of all of them. He wrote a few of them. These are, I believe, 17 episodes, and he wrote maybe 4. And what other inputs he put in there? Well, most of the other things were done by other people. The giant balloons there that were guards, well, that wasn't his idea. That was someone else's who did that, like most everything there. And as I said, the iconic location where The Prisoner was filmed, well, the bottom line is that that was a place that was found by the Danger Man production company to film one of their episodes there. So is this all that great? Is that profound? Well, as he said, it's amazing what a group effort can put together, particularly when you get professionals in there who know how to edit these things properly and do a lot to it. I mean, he had a couple episodes that were so bad that an editor fixed them and made them good. But he couldn't do that. He had no skill. He had no background. And he was a very uncooperative person. And he hurt people. He was rude to them and treated them like garbage. I wonder if his daughters were treated like garbage on a set, that he would like that. Or would he go over there and threaten them or scream at his eyes? So Nothing. Did he get any causes? Did he support anybody? Was he politically active? Did he? No. He did TV in the 70s with Peter Falk, who, by the way, is a Jew. If you think that someone's so conflicting of that. So the whole idea is that all of that doesn't make any sense. And the fact that they keep harping on his problems with sexuality being linked to his Catholic religion is absurd. This guy was an uptight maniac who couldn't deal with relationships or women, and this is what he was afraid of. To somehow think that TV, sexuality, kissing, and so forth was in any way objectionable is absurd. Nothing was allowed in TV. In the 60s, you have to have separate beds in Hollywood. You couldn't even have one bed. People were supposed to be sleeping apart. So what are we talking about here? So certainly TV wouldn't represent that. He said, well, on TV, you don't have a choice. It comes in your house. Well, this is true to a degree. And that's, of course, why it was highly censored. So nor was the sexuality in James Bond films. And certainly The Saint, another TV show, a British TV show, certainly had nothing there of any gratuitous or strong sexual context to it whatsoever on the TV shows. And even James Bond, you're talking about films that were basically PG, and there's very little there other than the nasty attitude. You think you would have liked James Bond because James Bond's pretty much a nasty murderer and so forth. So you think he would have related to that character a little more and been to it. But he could have never pulled that off. He was too drunken, too nasty in general to pull off sophisticated people like James Bond and particularly the Saint that Roger Moore did. So the whole idea is that's all a fantasy to think that he may have been offered that. I don't know if anybody would have signed him, but I'll tell you right now, he would have never been able to complete it. And he knew he couldn't complete it. He knew he couldn't do a series and speak the lines of other people. He tried that with Danger Man, and he couldn't get that going for more than a couple of years. He certainly couldn't have committed to that. And nobody in a real Hollywood production, like a James Bond film, that was a big budget, done by a bunch of professionals, would have put up with his garbage, including the fact that he refuses to even sign contracts. Yeah, like everybody, people, Patrick McGoohan, like so many other people, like the Wazorski sisters, are not very likable people in general. And they're basically making personal statements that we then, as the public, look at and say, well, this is it. But are they making strong statements? Well, certainly The Matrix didn't really emphasize the biggest problem in our lives, which is horrible corruption. Certainly The Prisoner didn't either. It touched on a few things which are certainly not new. After all, it was talked about in the 60s, so how new could it be? And it certainly wasn't very shocking. It was a fantasy, as The Matrix was. So you can get away with a lot in The Matrix, and the problem is that it didn't really follow up. It got very philosophical and not getting into the street. Really street looking at how life is really shown in the Billy Jack movies. This is real life, people, where people are being terrorized, being raped, corruption is running rampant. This is the real world. So if you haven't seen those marvelous Billy Jack films, make sure you get them. Make sure you see the whole series of one vigilante and how people refuse to. And the other thing I like about Billy Jack is he shows who the bad guys are too. And those bad guys are your neighbors. And he made sure he made that statement as well. So it's unfortunate. Billy Jack was a genius. Tom McLaughlin really did fantastic statements and action films. Were the first person to do out of body, to go on spirit walks, because he had that Indian overtone to it. Really masterpieces that never ever. He was way ahead of the goofy Star Wars with the little goofball Yaki Yoda who talks like a European. Me go to store. Well, people really talk like that. Most of the world does, by the way. People say, why does Yoda talk like that? Because that's how the world talks. So the whole idea is that these goofy little dime store philosophy taken from serials that the producers of Star Wars got it from, really $2 serials that were filmed in the 40s, pale in comparison to do this. But did anybody assist the Billy Jack movies in that? No. There was a big movie, a script written for that, from what I understand, somebody paid $5 million to have written, which never made it to Hollywood movie production. Why? This is so typical of Hollywood. So the whole idea is that all of this was put out there, but those are real. Billy Jackson's real life with real characters that bleed, that are cut, that are tortured, and that die. People are raped and murdered. We didn't see much of that in any of the other films. Certainly, we saw very little of it in The Prisoner, and certainly very little of that was ultimately demonstrated in a more gross fashion in Matrix. But the bottom line, without getting out, yeah, this happened there, don't give me into that nonsense. We're talking about general things here. So the bottom line is real life was demonstrated in the Billy Jack films, which are extremely profound and completely and totally ignored. Don't be one of those people that ignore it. Check those films out. Listen to the commentaries and enter the world of Gnosis.